The wind scoured the ragged spruce that clung to the shoulders of the Frostfang foothills, rasping over bark and needle like a saw against bone. It carried shards of night-born ice that whispered across Bran Stark's cheeks, stinging just enough to remind him he still possessed flesh. Somewhere behind that cold scrape sensation pulsed the Weirnet, a current deeper than blood. Yet for this moment the boy who would be raven and wolf alike anchored himself in the old familiarity of skin and breath. Hodor's broad back moved ahead of him, swaying with the long strides that had become a rhythm as steady as a great bell. Between each roll of those mighty shoulders Mira Reed paced lightly, lean spear bobbing in a sentry's cadence while her eyes, the color of deep marsh water, searched every twist of shadow. Farther behind, Jojen's cough crackled again, and Bran felt the momentary tremor ripple through the group's fragile tether of hope. They had skirted the worst of the gorge's stone teeth before the sky paled, and on the slope beyond lay the last miles of the gift, wild land that once fattened the Night's Watch and now lay half-abandoned to ghosts and whispers. But beyond that, beyond the ragged forest line where pale winter light shimmered upon hoarfrost, rose the wall. In dreams Bran had flown above it as raven and seen the pale spine of ice stretching over the world's crown. In green dreams he had walked tunnels beneath, damp with centuries of bitter drip, and glimpsed black brothers singing dirges to keep madness at bay. But never had those visions shown him Hodor's death beneath clawed snow, nor the wooden door shattering in a flurry of splinters as time folded on itself. The three-eyed crow's guidance had twisted like a river, countless branches, countless outcomes. This was one the old roots had permitted Bran Stark before the wall, with Hodor's steady breath still fogging the dawn. They crested a rise studded with frost-coated boulders. Bran felt the low hum of the weirwood network tremble as his gaze locked upon the wall's face. A sheer sheet of argent, mottled by ancient hoarfrost and the blue reflections of a sky not yet kissed by the sun. Even from leagues off its enormity dwarfed the world, dwarfing castles and mountains alike, as though the gods had chosen to drive a single nail through the land to keep reality from unraveling. Perhaps, Bran wondered, it served exactly that purpose. Mira slowed, snow crunching beneath her narwhal hide boots. She planted but of spear in drift, leaning close. "We should reach the abandoned tower by dusk," she murmured, voice shielded from wind by a raised fur collar. "Jojen needs rest." Her glance slid to her brother. The pallor of his cheeks had softened to sickly pearl in the cold, and the sheen of sweat along his brow froze to dull crystals. Hodor turned his head at the mention of rest, wide hazel eyes questioning. "Hodor?" he offered, as if the single word might solve every riddle. Bran touched the giant's arm. Layers of stitched bearskin trembled with quiet strength. "Soon, Hodor. Just a little farther." He tried to sound older than his dozen years, tried to sound like the lordling he once believed he'd become. But the wind seemed to peel those layers away, leaving only the fear that had followed him from Winterfell through burned villages, past the silent pools beneath the weirwood's red leaves, across the broken keep of the last green seer. The fear that destiny hinged upon a boy carried like luggage atop a gentle giant's back. They pressed on. Noon bled pale gold behind clotting clouds, and the temperature plunged even as light arrived. Hoarfrost whispered from each limb of the ghost trees. Ravens perched silent upon skeletal branches as though carved from midnight. Bran felt their dark eyes upon him, kin of feathered self hovering behind the prison of his skull. Yet not a caw split the air. Even the birds sensed the fulcrum ahead. When they reached the ruined holdfast, a squat ring of stone half sunken in permafrost, Mira guided them beneath a cracked lintel where an iron eye still dangled on rusted hinge. Inside, snow drifts barricaded half the chamber, but the hearth pit remained. Mira and Hodor set about chopping splintered roof beams while Bran nestled Jojen near the emptied firebowl, wrapping the slender boy in an extra fur. Jojen's breath rattled. Every exhale seemed to carry a filament of his spirit upward like chimney smoke. "I dreamt of an oak split by lightning," Jojen whispered, lids heavy. Within the core grew a single green shoot younger than the storm. "We are the shoot. Save your strength," Bran urged. "Strength lies not in flesh, Brandon of House Stark. It is in choosing the path when the tree forks." Jojen's thin fingers lifted, pointing beyond cracked stones toward the wall. Your roots must pass through ice. Only then can they reach the sea of stars. Bran swallowed. He wanted to retort with a child's objection. He wished Jojen would stop speaking in riddles, stop acting as if each breath might be his last gift. But Bran saw the dull glaze of fever, and he heard the finality curling around the edges of the boy's words like frost around a dying leaf. Mira crouched beside them, soot smudging her cheek. "He'll make it," she said softly, though her eyes sought Bran's with brittle hope. "He always does." Bran looked away, toward Hodor's hulking silhouette heaping wood onto the reborn hearth. Hack splinter hack. The rhythm thudded like a reluctant heartbeat. Bran closed his own eyes, drew in a lungful of icy air, and slipped into the slipstream beneath skin. The world thinned, senses blossoming into roots and feathers. He felt the floor's stones as they pressed against the weight of history. He drifted outward, through walls where tiny lichen clung, their cells cracking with the freeze. He soared upward on raven wings to perch in the ruined watchtower above, gazing down upon their fragile flame. And beyond he glimpsed the wall again, pale and immense, gleaming like a sword of the first men. Within the ice, he sensed throbbing rivulets, veins of memory trapped in crystal, echoes of vows, of horn blasts, of children abandoned to cold justice. But he felt something else. Faint tremors, as though something clawed at the ice from the far side, desperate not to breach but to retreat. The sensation prickled Bran's mind, a warning encoded in chill. He folded wings, returned to bones and blood. His eyelids fluttered. Mira touched his shoulder. "You were gone longer this time." "Not long," he murmured. "But I saw the wall, and someone afraid." "Afraid of us?" she asked. "Afraid of what follows us." Silence spread, save crackle of their newborn fire. Night deepened, and the ruined holdfast's emptiness seemed to swell with the dark. Outside, the wind changed direction. Hodor sat cross-legged, shoulders hunched like a hill, forming a barricade at the doorway while Mira dozed lightly, knife still in hand. Bran remained awake, feeding slivers of wood to the coals, his eyes reflecting emberlight. Dream voices nudged at him, memories of the three-eyed crow urging patience, reminding that the door must be held, that sacrifices seed salvation. But those voices came from another branch of the tree, one already pruned by choice. Bran clenched his jaw. No more doors, he promised to the fire. Not Hodor's door, not any door sealed by another's bleeding palms. A hush preceded the howl, distant yet distinct. Bran froze. The sound was not the voice of an ordinary wolf. It hummed with deeper resonance, woven with the timbre of countless throats. It seeped through narrow embrasures, curdling the air. Mira jolted upright. Hodor's huge frame stiffened. Jojen whimpered in sleep. Bran glanced toward the doorway's ragged frame. On impulse, he reached across the weirnet, not for ravens, but for summer. The dire wolf answered in a flash of senses. Snow under pads, iron tang of distant blood, the hum of other hearts shivering on the wind. Bran felt his wolf brother racing through moon-washed pines, skirting patches of disturbed snow where footfalls too light for men, too halt for beasts, left twisted sigils. Whites, the fear word uncurled in thought tongue. They tracked the heat of life like moths. Summer's hackles bristled. Bran guided the wolf, flanking toward the holdfast from the darkness. The howling chorus built again, closer, fracturing into many throats. Bran snapped back to his own body, heart slamming. "They're coming," he hissed.
Mira spun, spertib glittering.
"How many?" "Enough." Hodor rose, the ceiling beams brushing the fur hood crowning his head. "Hodor," he murmured, voice low as an avalanche preparing to drop. Bran reached for the bow salvaged from the cave, black yew etched with runes of children design. He knocked one of the obsidian-tipped shafts. They possessed only a handful, one per target. But at the wall, there would be more weapons and, perhaps, brothers who still believed in fighting the true war. The first shape lurched into view at the tree line. A figure sheathed in rime, eyes twin stars of frozen blue. Behind it shuffled others, silhouettes uneven as broken marionettes. Snow deadened their steps until they reached the frost-crusted yard. Mira planted her boots. Bran felt the old dreams coil. Visions of a wide wooden door exploding into shards. Visions of Hodor screaming his single word against inexorable time. But here there was no door. Here choice remained. Summer, Bran whispered, and the dire wolf dashed from the shadows, a silver streak. His jaws locked around the calf of the leading white, tearing frosted flesh from bone. The creature toppled, thrashing in silence where lungs held no breath. Bran loosed an arrow. The obsidian found the white's neck, the blue fire in its eyes quenched to darkness. One. He reached for another. Mira danced forward, spear whirling, slicing through brittle ligaments, severing the sinuous magic that marionette dead men. Hodor seized a splintered gate beam and swung, crushing ribcages into snowy paste. Yet for each husk that fell, two more pressed forward. Inside Jojen moaned, as though tides of death tugged at the seams of his fading dream. Bran spared half a heartbeat to glance back, and saw a thin band of light limning the boy's brow beneath closed lids, as though a hidden candle burned behind bone. The sight chilled Bran more than any winter gust. Focus. The lesson of Maester Luwin rang. Pick targets. Protect the living. He fired again, 2-3 each arrow cracking through undead bone. Summer wove between staggering shapes, hamstringing, ripping throats.
Mira leapt, stabed, widreu, spun.
Hodor bellowed, "Hodor!" as he slammed wood into skull. Still they came. Bran's quiver emptied. Mira's spearhead snapped against a collapsed spine. Hodor's improvised club splintered. Snowfield writhed with limbs. Inside, Mira shouted. Hodor stepped back, scooping Bran with one hand, hauling Jojen over shoulder with the other. Mira dragged Summer by scruff. They retreated into crumbling hall, Bran firing stray throwing knives. Iron, not dragonglass, yet enough to slow joints. Then Hodor shoved a fallen lintel stone across the doorway. It jammed, leaving a gap wide as a cat's body, but slowed entry. White's clawed, blue gaze glowing in slit. Frozen fingers worried at stone. Bran's mind raced. Flights to the wall would take hours, they lacked time. He saw again the door of prophecy, wooden planks straining, and heard the command from another branch. Hold the door. But prophecy was a map, not law. Could a different path deter the same storm? Bran pushed past the panic, diving into the weirnet. He reached for roots that wound beneath the holdfast, memories of when Black brothers felled timber here centuries earlier. He slid along those memories to stones beneath the hearth where old builders carved drainage pits. There, an oubliette narrow, leading to a tunnel half-caved yet passable by wolf and boy. In body, Bran gasped. There's a way below, a tunnel to the ice lakes. We can outpace them. Mira blinked, hair plastered with frost. If it collapses. It won't, Bran said, though certainty hung by a thread. Hodor. Break the hearth floor. The giant stared, confusion dawning. Mira shoved coals aside. Hodor stomped. Once, twice stones cracked. On third, they shattered, revealing black hollow. Beyond the doorway whites hissed, a language colder than wind. One squeezed shoulder through, scraping ribs on rough stone. Summer lunged, shoving it back, but another followed. Go! Bran cried. Mira swung down first, spear haft used as ladder. She landed with grunt. Hodor eased Jojen into her arms. Then Bran. Summer dropped next, claws clacking. Bran looked up as Hodor prepared to descend. Whites burst through, hands raking for Bran's guardian. For a heartbeat, the echoes of that other future rang. Hodor's body blocking portal, howls of hold the door, hold the door. But Bran held the tether. Hodor down now, he ordered. Something in Bran's voice, some used authority of both boy and greenseer, cut through the swirl. Hodor obeyed, collapsing his frame through the aperture. Gnarled fingers scraped will cloak but found only air. Bran yanked the rope of vision. He forced the roots above to shift, to sag. Stones fell, sealing the gap in a choking cloud of dust. Dark swallowed them. Mira struck flint, revealing a narrow passage dripping with ice sheen. Far above, muffled thuds reverberated, wights hammering futilely at a tomb of rubble. "We must move," she said. Hodor crouched, carrying Bran. Ceiling brushed his back. They advanced into the cold belly of the earth, guided only by Mira's flickering spark and the low rumble of Hodor's breath. Behind, Summer's eyes gleamed amber, guarding the rear. Hours blurred. Crawl spaces where they dragged Jojen on folded cloak. Climbs over fallen beams webbed with frost. Pools of groundwater iced into mirrors that cracked beneath Hodor's weight but held. Bran drifted inside half-sleep, mind wandering tunnels of time as feet trudged corridors of stone. He saw visions. Jon Snow on frozen parapets, cloak snapping. A woman in red whispering prayers that burned the air. A Kingslayer weeping beneath ruined weirwood. Dragons circling a distant city of dust. And always, always the wall. A gate not only of ice but of choice. When they finally emerged, the sky had begun to silver. They stood upon a slope twinkling with dawn frost, southeast of Castle Black. The wall loomed so near that Bran felt its cold exhale upon his cheeks. Runnels of pale light spilled over crenellations high above where watchmen once paced. Now only ravens perched. Mira sagged, exhaustion hollowing her features but relief blooming in gaze. "We made it." Hodor gazed at the towering barrier, eyes round with awe. "Hodor," he breathed, the syllable hushed as prayer. Bran lifted himself, bones ache-heavy yet heart thrumming. The weight of white pursuit receded, though far off he sensed the restless dead. Still hunting, still drawn, yet now behind leagues and ice and fate's redirection. He looked down at Jojen, lying unresponsive in Mira's arms. The boy's skin glowed faintly under first light, but breath fluttered weak as moth wings. "Help is beyond the gate," Bran said, though he did not know if any brothers remained alive to offer it. "We must hurry." They descended toward the wooden postern, one of the minor sally ports half buried in drift. Summer sniffed and darted ahead, tail sweeping. Hodor followed, careful steps crunching. Bran's thoughts churned. They had reached the wall before Hodor's death, but threads of prophecy rarely sever. They simply twist. What new sacrifices would the Weirnet demand? Could he bear another? Could Mira bear losing Jojen? Could the Watchbear learning the true war had breached their threshold? The wall's surface loomed, veins of sapphire glimmering. Somewhere within lay gates of black iron that only vowed men could open. Bran flexed his soul's wings, preparing to bargain. Perhaps with the spirits of deceased commanders held inside the ice. Perhaps with ravens perched at the heights. Perhaps with Jon, if his brother yet lived at Castle Black. He sensed shifting currents, shadows moving on the far side of the wall, lights guttering in castle towers. A horn blast echoed faint but clear, carrying across snow like a lost memory. Mira tensed. "Is that for us?" Bran closed his eyes, listening. The horn sounded again. Single, drawn note, strangers approaching. Not wildlings. Not rangers returning. Something else. Something unexpected this side of dawn. Bran looked up at the magnitude of frozen stone and whispered to whatever gods still cared, "Open." A groan answered from within the ice, deep and ancient, and a seam of white light slit the wall's face where old hinges stirred. They stepped toward the widening cleft, into breath of colder air than any night beyond. Hodor ducked beneath the crystalline arch. Bran perched upon his back like a young prince entering a forbidden realm. Mira followed, spear-haft angled. Summer trotted close, hackles bristling but muzzle lifted in curiosity rather than threat. Behind, the world they had crossed felt suddenly small, fragile, and far away. Inside, torches sputtered along a passage carved from the heart of winter. Bran's breath crystallized. Stone stairs curled downward toward the gatehouses of Castle Black. Voices echoed, human voices, gruff and wary. Silhouettes approached. Black cloaks, ragged mail, eyes wide at the sight of a giant with a boy upon his shoulders and a marsh maiden carrying a dying seer. Bran took a breath, ready to speak his name, his house, his purpose. But the future quivered, branching anew with every heartbeat. He saw glimpses, alliances forged, brothers rallied, dragons yet unseen, a night that would not wait forever. Above them, the wall groaned shut, sealing out the first rays of dawn. And somewhere in the labyrinth of possible tomorrows, a door remained whole, unshattered by claw or time. The wall had been reached. The next journey had begun. Torch flames sputtered in iron brackets along the narrow spine of the tunnel, glazing the ice walls with orange ripples that faded into blue depths. Bran drank in the shimmering light as if it were a story written for him alone. Within the translucent mass he glimpsed half-formed faces, ghosts of men who had taken the black centuries before, shifting as the flames wavered, then vanishing. Hodor's heavy boots thudded on the frozen ground, step after step, the cadence of a drum that steadied Bran's racing thoughts. Behind Hodor padded Summer, tail low but eyes keen. Mira followed, Jojen limp in her arms like a reed bent under winter weight. Ahead, the passage widened. A portcullis of black iron teeth stood half-raised. Beyond it stretched a guardroom paneled in pines so old they had petrified to stone. Shapes loomed in the threshold. 5 men in crow-black cloaks, crossbows lifted, blades half-drawn. Steam curled from their mouths, mingling with torch smoke. Their eyes flicked from the giant to the direwolf to the spear at Mira's back. Only then did they settle on the boy riding shoulders. A boy with dark hair, a wolf's head clasp at his cloak, and dead legs hanging motionless in fur wrappings. The foremost of the Black brothers stepped closer, helm tucked under one arm. Gray streaked his beard. Scars ridged the skin below one ear as if a claw had raked him once and nearly claimed his life. His voice, when it came, was gravel softened by surprise. 7 save us, he said. Another bloody giant. Hodor halted, blinking down at the swirl.
Dosprav.
Hodor, he mumbled, uncertain. Bran touched the thick hood. He's no danger, he called, pushing steel into his voice. He's Hodor, my friend. The crossbowmen did not lower their arms. One, a lank youth with cheeks pitted by frostbite, shifted restlessly. Giants belong to the free folk, he muttered. No, Bran felt Summer's growl vibrate through his own ribs. He belongs to Winterfell. Silence. The wounded, scarred brother studied Bran's face. Winterfell? He echoed. Something like dawning recognition flickered across his features, yet was half buried under months of darkness, fear, and the endless roll call of the dead. My name is Brandon Stark, Bran went on, voice echoing off the ice. Son of Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell. We seek guest right at Castle Black. At that, the men exchanged looks. A name carries power north of the neck. Even ragged, half-starved brothers felt its weight. The scarred man grunted. Castle Black is thin as mercy now. But the wall remembers the Starks. He raised a gloved hand, signaling the crossbows down. I'm Yarwick Holt, first builder. And you're a long way from home, my lord. Bran inclined his head, though some part of him held onto the memory of Maester Luwin's tutelage. Rank and courtesy mattered little when White snapped at the gate. We bring warning, he said, and a dying friend. He looked at Jojen, whose lips had gone nearly white. Holt's gaze followed. We've healers, and stew. Not fit for a king, but hot. He jerked his chin. Open it up, lads. The portcullis rattled higher. Hodor ducked through. Summer slunk, ribs brushing ice. Mira tried to nod thanks despite the tremble in her arms. Holt led them into the guardroom, where a brazier burned low and iron cauldrons steamed beside barrels of brined pork. A raven perched in a niche above the door, feathers fluffed. It croaked once, a rough, broken syllable that might have been snow. Bran felt his heart jolt. Jon, he whispered. Holt noticed. If you mean Lord Snow, you're in luck. He's returned from Hardhome with half the free folk clinging to the Shadow Tower like barnacles. The builder raised a brow. You brought a giant. Suppose that makes you kin. Bran swallowed hope and panic together. Jon alive meant another anchor to the past, to the boy he had been. But Jon at Castle Black meant the knives of his own brothers already seeking gaps in his armor. Rumors traveled faster than ravens. Bran remembered Samwell Tarly's whispers of mutiny in another branch of time. But those were old leaves on the tree. The wind might blow different through this bough. "Where is he?" Bran asked. "Lord Commander Solar." Holt gestured to a stair spiraling up through timber beams rimed white. "But you'll not see him before the maester sees your sickbed mate." He snapped to two younger brothers. "Carry the lad, and fetch broth." Mira yielded Jojen to calloused hands. Bran clenched the fur lining of his cloak as they bore him away. He told himself this was the safest place left in the world south of the lands of always winter, but the knot in his gut tightened. Holt waved the rest onward. "We'll stable the wolf in the old kennels." "He stays," Bran said, "where I can see him." Summer's ears perked, understanding the possessive tone if not the words. "Aye, very well." Holt scratched his beard. "Best see the commander sooner than later." "Come, then." The stair smelled of pitch and cold dust. Bran's unused legs dragged across Hodor's chest as they ascended. Memories of Winterfell's ramparts tugged him back. Clambering with Rickon, snowball fights with Robb, old Nan's tales drifting from windows. But time had ground those stone walls to chalk. They dissolved before he could clutch them. The Solar crouched atop the king's tower, its oaken door cracked to spill candlelight onto the landing. Holt rapped twice. A voice, ragged by exhaustion but unmistakable to Bran's ears. "Enter." They stepped inside. Jon Snow rose from behind a scar-scarred table cluttered with maps, raven's quills, and flickering lanterns. His black cloak hung from a rack. Sweat dampened his dark curls where they clung to his brow. Purple bruises shadowed one cheekbone. His left hand was wrapped in linen spotted with dried blood. Yet his gray eyes, the eyes of their father, were unbroken steel. For a heartbeat he stared in disbelief. Then the chair clattered over as he moved. "Bran!" The name cracked like ice. Jon's gaze swept the room. Giant, marsh girl, direwolf, scarred builder, but fixed upon the boy he'd last seen limp and fevered at Winterfell's gatehouse, carried cartwise to a southern fate that had since burned to ash. Bran felt suddenly small beneath that gaze. Words collapsed in his throat. Without thinking, he reached, mind, spirit, whatever thread bound him, and touched Summer. The direwolf padded forward. Jon fell to one knee, calloused fingers stroking the wolf's ruff as if confirming flesh, not dream. "You're alive," Jon breathed. He swallowed once, twice. "And you have Hodor, Mira?" He looked up, voice shaking with everything else he could not say. "How?" Bran found his tongue. "A crow with 3 eyes led me north. A green seer taught me truths. But now we've come back." He looked toward the south-facing slit windows, where pale dawn filtered through. "Because winter rides behind us." Jon's shoulders sagged, as though a weight too heavy to name had eased by a hair. He straightened, giving Hodor a searching nod, then Mira a soldier's respect. "First Builder," he said to Holt, "send for Samwell. Tell him Benjen's nephew has returned with dire news." He added in quieter tone, "And post guards at the square. I won't have his arrival stirring mutineers." Holt grunted acknowledgement and withdrew, closing the door. Jon faced Bran again. "You look older," he said softly. "Older than your years." "I feel it." Bran took a breath. "Jojen is dying. He led me here. He said my roots must pass through ice." Jon frowned. "Maester Gilly, maester in training, she'll tend your friend." He glanced at Bran's legs, hanging inert. "And you?" Bran shook his head. "Healed enough." Jon opened arms, hesitant as if fearing the embrace might break the boy's brittle body. Hodor knelt to lower Bran gently. Bran pressed against his brother's chest, smelling sweat, horse, smoke, a scent of home long lost. For a moment the walls of ice felt warm. When they parted, Bran's eyes burned. He blinked fiercely. The tears froze at once. Turning to crystals he brushed aside. "Tell me everything," Jon said. "From the day you vanished south." Bran did. Words tumbled out. Chaos at Winterfell, Theon's betrayal, escape through crypt and hidden tunnels, the silent village at Queen's Crown, the nights beneath Hodor's cloak when the cold chewed bone. Mira added her own strands. The haunted night fort, the rat cook's echoing knell, cold hands guiding them past white-filled lakes. Bran spared the darkest truths, the taste of skin when he wore Hodor's shape in dire moments, the face of leaf blossoming with fire when the cave fell. But he told of the weirwood throne, the merging of past and present, the door that had sealed Hodor's doom in another river of time. Jon listened, motionless save for the tightening of his jaw. Sometimes he poured tangy black tea from a kettle on the brazier, forcing warmth into Bran's hands. Sometimes he stared at the flicker of lamplight on steel armor hung against the wall, ghosts of duty he wasn't sure how to bear. When Bran finished, Jon turned to the maps scattered on the table. "I thought my burdens were stones enough," he said quietly. "Now I see only pebbles compared to yours." Bran felt hollow. "We all carry stones." Silence stretched. Outside the slit window, horns called once, then twice. Free folk being sorted at the day's muster. Jon's head lifted, but he did not move to leave. "At Hardhome," he said, "I saw dead men rise in scores. I looked into the eyes of the Night King as he claimed them. I thought that was terror." He faced Bran, voice low. "You rode before that terror toward it, and you still live. Only because of Hodor, because of Mira, because the roots twisted." Bran looked at his brother's bandaged hand. "But terror follows." Jon nodded. "It's at the gate already." He turned the map toward Bran. 100,000 wildlings camp below the Shadow Tower, most too old or too young to fight. Here, he tapped. At Mole's Town, refugees crowd the tunnels. And here, Eastwatch, they send ravens nightly, reporting sails on the horizon. The others press by land, now by sea. He flexed his injured hand. "We hold 13 castles in ruin, 3 manned by fewer than 2 dozen. And the brothers who would knife you," Mira added, voice hard. Jon's mouth twitched. "Yes, them as well." Bran traced finger on the parchment, feeling the quiver of power inside him attuned to the world. "The wall was never meant to stand alone," he murmured. "Its magic flows through the weirnet, but some of those roots are cut." He closed eyes, searching inside the ice. He found veins clogged with black film, patches where sorcery bled thin. Someone's been carving the wall from within. Jon stiffened. Valyrian steel axes? Not steel alone. Words. Bones broken, blood spilled. Murder seeps into spells like salt eats away stone. Bran opened eyes. "If you fall, the wall cracks farther." Jon stepped back as if slammed. "Then I won't fall." A knock interrupted. Samwell Tarly, plump frame swaddled in maester's gray. He hesitated at the sight of direwolf and giant, but barreled forward with a grin splitting his round face. "Bran." "Oh, Bran, by the 7. I'll live, Sam," Bran said, though the warmth of Sam's tears on his glove belied that simplicity. Jon instructed Sam to see Jojen, to bring whatever leached the rattling fever. Sam bowed, heart thundering under robes, then bustled out. When the door shut, Jon exhaled. "I'll have my sisters here by dawn if I could. But Sansa is safe at the Eyrie, if rumors hold." "Arya," his voice cracked, "every raven brings tidings I can't trust." Bran studied him. The boy who'd sworn to protect him on the battlements of Winterfell had become a man burdened by an army of the dead and the treachery of the living. Yet his core had not changed. "I came for more than refuge," Bran said. "I came to fight." Jon's eyes narrowed at his brother's motionless legs. "With mind, with everything the old gods lend." Bran touched the tabletop. "There's a network below the wall, a cavern where hot water runs. Children of the forest carved runes there in the Dawn Age. The magic still hums, but it's sleeping. I can wake it." Jon turned away, pressing a palm to the icy window slit, watching flurries spiral past. "If it gives us any edge, we'll try." He faced Bran. "But you'll need rest first. Food. And we must heal Jojen." Bran nodded, though visions tugged. Rising tide of whites banging on outer gates. White spiders big as hounds scuttling across battlements. Horns blowing thrice until lungs burst. He shivered. "I'll rest," he promised. "Tonight." Jon clasped his shoulder. "Welcome home, little brother." In the infirmary of Castle Black, a drafty hall once used for storing grain, Mira knelt beside Jojen's cot while Sam muttered over vials of willow bark and horehound. Gilly helped, her hair tucked beneath linen, her babe cradled in a sling. Lanterns flickered. The air smelled of pine tar and sweat. Bran sat across, legs dangling from Hodor's lap, summer curled at their feet like a snow shadow given breath. Jojen slept, breath shallow. Sam pressed 2 fingers to his wrist, counting beats. "He's burning below the skin," he said, "but I've seen men survive this chill. We'll leech the ill humors." Mira brushed Jojen's hair. "He's no ordinary man. Visions drain him." She looked at Bran with haunted eyes. "We can't lose him now." "We won't," Bran said, though the Weirnet whispered differently. Threads of green wavering, some snapping in the wind. Sam prepared a poultice of mouse-ear and kingsfoil. As he spread it on Jojen's chest, the boy stirred. Eyes fluttered, pupils clouded, his lips parted. "Beneath the wall," Jojen breathed, voice skeletal, "sleep the bones of giants. Wake them not, but bind them with truth." He coughed, blood-flecked. "The door is open. The door is whole. Time bites its tail." Bran leaned closer, pulse hammering. "Which door, Jojen?" But the seer exhaled and slipped back into dreaming. Sam dabbed blood from lips. "He speaks in riddles." "Prophecies," Mira corrected. Bran felt a tremor. Some were more than prophecy. They were warnings. A trumpet sounded in the courtyard. 2 notes, then a third, cut short. Footsteps pounded overhead. Jon burst in, face like stone carved yesterday. "Ravens from Eastwatch," he said. "A fleet blacker than night on the horizon. Sails lacquered in ice. They make no signal." Bran's heart quailed. "The others come by sea." Jon nodded. "Or their thralls." He looked at his brother with grim finality. "We ride at dusk to meet them." "Bran." "I'm coming," Bran cut in. Jon shook his head. "Your place is with the roots." "My power kills whites," Bran said. "I can command fire in trees, stone in walls." "Or lose yourself," Mira whispered. Bran met her gaze. "If I hide, men die anyway." Jon hesitated, but the horns outside screamed again. Shriller. "Decisions must be swift on nights like this." "Very well," he said at last. "You'll ride Hodor." He knelt to Bran's eye level. "But obey my call. If I say retreat, you retreat." Bran nodded.
Sam cleared throat.
"Maester's orders. Jojen cannot be moved." Mira clasped her brother's hand. "I'll stay." Hodor's shoulders drooped. "Hodor." Bran touched Giant's sleeve. "We'll come back." Outside, Castle Black seethed like a kicked hive. Brothers donned patched mail. Wildlings armed with rusted axes gathered behind corral fences. Snowflakes thickened, swirling in sheets that seemed to erase the world beyond 20 paces. But Bran could feel the sea inside his mind. Water turned glassy under unnatural calm, distant timbers snapping as ice-encased hulls. Jon stood astride his horse, an iron-gray destrier pawing the snow. Ghost trotted beside him, white fur radiant in gloom. He addressed the assembled throng. Black brothers, giants, spearwives, green boys with pitchforks. "The dead sail," his voice rang, "but we are the wall's living edge. We'll hold them till dawn or ash. Will you stand?" A ragged cheer rose, fear-cracked but defiant. Tormund Giant's Bane swung a club of redwood, roared something obscene about white mothers. Even the crows laughed. Hodor bent, allowing Bran to mount his broad back. Bran clutched the giant's fur, feeling muscles flex beneath. Summer loped ahead, hackles bristled. Jon nodded once more to Bran, brother to brother, and raised his sword. Longclaw's pale stone wolf caught torchlight. "To the East Barrow Road," he shouted. They moved, columns strung between drifts, torches bobbing like a river of sparks.
Snow werd brandslesjes.
In the distance, beyond the slope where trees grew sparse, he saw the wall's flank curving toward Eastwatch, an immense ghost. And somewhere past that, black sails carved silence across a moonless sea. He closed his eyes. Within the weirnet he tasted salt, felt cold waves underfoot as another mind might feel grass. He reached for the heart of the wall again, roots pulsing with ancient magic. The spell stone inside rumbled. Words etched in the true tongue glowed. He spoke them without lips. The ice answered. Blue veins brightened, coursing toward Eastwatch like glacial lightning. A groan shook the ground. Hodor stumbled. Bran steadied him. Ahead, Jon reined, alarmed. "Are you doing that?" Mira called, riding a shaggy Garen she'd borrowed. Bran listened. The wall's magic sought fuel. Memories, life, fire. It drew on the ghosts Bran had seen in the ice. But those echoes were faint. He needed living conduits, songs, oaths. He opened his mind wider, brushing across the spirits walking beside him. The courage in Jon's heart, the savage joy in Tormund's laughter, the stubborn loyalty in Sam's tear-streaked face. Threads of light wove from them, feeding the wall's veins. Bran guided the flow, pressing it toward Eastwatch, forging a lattice. Suddenly he saw through a rook spiraling above the sea. Through its eyes the water burned with an icy glare. Mist coiled around hulls of black-timbered ships. Figures lined the decks, corpse-white soldiers in armored tiers, helms crowned with icicles, eyes shining cerulean fire. At each prow snarled a dragon skull carved of blue crystal. Frozen banners drooped in windless chill. A single figure stood centered on the flagship, tall, horned, robes crusted in frost. The Night King lifted one pale hand, and snowflakes paused mid-fall. He looked directly at the rook at Bran. A spear of cold pierced the bird. Bran reeled, yanked back into his own skull. He gasped, heartbeat like drumfire. Snow blurred. Hodor's breath puffed white. Jon rode beside him, alarmed. "Bran!" "He saw me," Bran rasped. "He's coming for me. For you. For the wall." Jon set jaw. "Let him." Night swallowed the army by the time they reached the Eastwatch spur, wind-swept cliffs overlooking the shivering sea. Eastwatch by the sea had always felt more lighthouse than fortress, but now its towers burned with desperate flame. Archers lined the docks. Scorpions primed with dragonglass bolts creaked on the walls, but water separated them from the fleet. Bran dismounted, legs useless in drift. Hodor lifted him to a watch platform overlooking the icy bay. The fleet anchored a mile offshore, waiting. Jon paced beside Cotter Pike, the grizzled commander of Eastwatch, who stank of salt and rum. Their shouts whipped away on the wind. Bran's mind hovered between worlds, his own eyes on the black water, his spirit inside the wall's core, coaxing the ancient lattice to life. He felt Hodor's broad hand on his shoulder, grounding him. A horn blast, then another, then silence, strange and absolute. Out on the sea, frost blossomed around the hulls like a deadly flower. Bran sensed magic, cold as the void between stars, pouring from the Night King's uplifted palm. The sea froze, water congealed into a mirror, trapping ships in a cradle of crystal. Oars groaned, snapping under pressure. Hulls creaked, yet the ships did not shatter. Instead, ice thickened into a roadway of glass leading straight to the shore. An invasion bridge. Jon gripped the parapet. "Light the trenches," he roared. Pitch trenches ablaze with lamp oil erupted along the shoreline, flames licking skyward. But the ice emitted no steam. It swallowed heat like a hungry beast. Whites began to dismount upon the frozen walkway, ranks of silent killers advancing with terrible discipline. Archers loosed. Dragonglass arrows shattered skulls. But the dead kept coming, stepping over the fallen. Scorpion bolts felled the bigger monstrosities, giant whites with clubs of packed snow, but gaps closed instantly. Behind these trod white walkers, armored and spear-bearing, their presence sapping color from the night. Bran watched through Summer's eyes now, pacing the ramparts. Panic threatened to overwhelm him, but the bond with his wolf lent clarity. Sense of smell intensified, adrenaline sharpening thought. We must break the bridge, Bran realized. Icebound to magic. Disrupt the magic and the bridge fails. But the Night King himself anchored the spell like a spike. Bran reached through the wall again, guiding its lattice toward the sea. The veins of light raced downward, curling along bedrock beneath the bay, FO. Remaining a net of heatless white flame. Now he pulsed now. The net surged upward. For a heartbeat, the ice bridge glowed like diamond lit from within. Whites paused. So did the Night King. Then the lattice erupted shards of white energy slicing up through the frozen sea, splintering the roadway into towers of shattered crystal. Ships buckled, tossed as the ice cracked. Whites plunged screaming where mouths held no air. A roar rose from Eastwatch's walls, wildling and crow alike cheering as enemy ranks fell into black water. But the Night King raised his arms again, and the broken bridge knit itself, reborn. His power outstripped the wall's decaying veins. Bran gasped. The strain drained him. Blood dribbled from one nostril. Hodor steadied him. Jon shouted orders. Catapults loaded, dragonglass barrels flung, ignited midair. Explosions peppered the frozen channel, but the dead pressed on. Bran realized. The wall's magic needed a stronger pulse, fresh blood, living words. He spoke to Hodor. I must go into the ice. Hodor. Fear trembled in the giant's voice. Bran met gentle eyes. Carry me to the wall's base. There's a cleft where warm springs flow. I need to reach it. Jon overheard, racing up the stairs. You'll be unprotected. You'll be dead if I don't, Bran said. No time for softer words. Jon's fist clenched. Tormund, a guard for my brother. The wildling thundered over, red hair streaming. We'll escort him. Bran gripped Hodor's hood. Now. They descended spiraling steps at breakneck speed. Summer ahead, Tormund and two spearmen behind. Arrows whizzed overhead. Snow hissed around them like snakes. At the wall's foot Bran felt the spellstone's hummings. Steam curled where hot water trickled from hidden fissures. The opening, a crack big enough for a child, yawned black. Hodor, set me inside, Bran commanded. The giant eased him through. Within, warmth lapped Bran's cheeks. He smelled minerals, soil, ancient resin. He closed eyes, sank wholly into the weir network. No wolf, no boy, only green fire coursing through roots. He spiraled deep beneath the wall, where petrified weirwood fused with ice. At the core, a heart tree slept. No face carved, but rings of red sap glowed faintly. Bran laid his mind upon it, whispering names older than moonrise. He offered memories. His first fall, old Nan's lullabies, Ned's smile, to feed the flame. The heart tree drank, veins brightening. Outside, the wall answered. A boom like thunder, a flash of emerald streaking along crevices. The ice bridge shuddered. The Night King turned sharply. Bran reached further still, drawing on the living nearby. He tasted Jon's stubborn will, Sam's compassion, Mira's fierce devotion, the raw innocence of Gilly's babe. He wove them like threads into a single cord and bound it to the heart tree. The wall sang. A column of ice exploded beneath the Night King's flagship. The vessel split, tilting. Shards flew in glittering arcs. The Night King leapt to the next deck, but fissures raced across the frozen sea, cracking the bridge anew, this time faster than it could heal. Bran pressed harder. The tree strained, bark lightning, sap boiling. Then, like a candle blown, his strength sputtered. The river of shared memory became a trickle. He had given too much. With fading sight, he glimpsed the Night King raise both arms. From the deck, a spiral of storm formed, twisting toward the wall. Spear-shaped ice shards whipped through air. Ramparts splintered. Men screamed. Bran felt his tether slipping. The heart tree pulsed one last surge. Outside, the storm slammed into an invisible barrier. Magic newly woven. It dissipated in flakes, but Bran's mind shattered with it. He plummeted back to his body, pain like molten iron in his skull. He convulsed inside the fissure, vision gray. Hodor's arm reached, dragging him out into the snow. Bran's ears rang. His head lolled. Above, the undead withdrew, bridge collapsing again. Ships drifted in shattered ice floes. For this night, Eastwatch stood. Jon knelt by Bran. "Stay with me," he pleaded, voice hoarse. Bran blinked, words stuck behind teeth. Eventually a whisper, "Roots, hold." Jon's relief was a silent sob. They bore Bran back through storm's ragged edge. The battle waned, the dead retreating toward open water to regroup. But the long night would test them again. Inside Castle Black's infirmary, Mira tearfully welcomed Bran's semi-conscious form. Sam applied poultices to Bran's temples, murmuring prayers. Outside, horns signaled victory. Yet every man knew dawn's fragile triumph might yield to dusk's darker assault. Bran drifted in dreams of branching paths. He saw Jojen stirring, fever easing. He saw Mira smile, rare as midsummer. He saw Jon, cloak tattered, kneel before a council, wildlings and crows united, raising a dragon-glass dagger in oath. He saw Arya's face in candlelight, Sansa's quill scratching treaties, Rickon chasing a dire shadow too fast to catch. He saw Hodor alive, door unbroken, and he saw the Night King's eyes, distant but watching, as if puzzles amuse eternities. When morning bled red across the sky, Bran opened eyes to Mira's exhausted grin. Jojen sat propped on pillows, pale but breathing steady, whispering of oak leaves budding in spring. Jon entered, fresh bandage across brow. "The fleet drifts south, broken," he reported. "For now." Bran nodded, his voice rasped. "The wall lives." Jon smiled, rare and weightless. "Because you did." Summer nuzzled Bran's hand. Hodor beamed, whispering his name like a benediction. Bran let his head sink into furs. He knew the war was but begun, but paths had bent. Choices forged new starts. And somewhere far off, amid a forest of futures, the door that once demanded a giant's life remained shut, whole, awaiting some gentler destiny. The wind outside shifted, carrying scents of pine and promise. Bran listened, heart steady. The song of the wall had changed key, and he would learn its melody in nights to come. The boy who rode a giant's shoulders closed his eyes, and for the first time since he had fallen from Winterfell's tower, he dreamed not of flight, nor of endless snow, but of standing whole on green grass lit by dawn. Hodor's soft snore rumbled through the infirmary rafters, a steady thunder that rolled beneath the higher notes of dawn birds huddled under the eaves. Bran floated in that hazy doorway between dream and waking, mind drifting along the pale currents of the Weirnet. In the tree but not a tree beneath the wall, the heartwood pulsed with slow light, and in that pulse Bran sensed every heartbeat inside Castle Black. Crow and free folk, giant and wolf, maester and babe, each rhythm a candle guttering in the wind that howled beyond the ice. He tasted new threads now, threads that had not sung in the lattice before the clash at Eastwatch. A shard of Tormund's boisterous laughter, hot as mulled wine. A strand of Val's resolve, plucked taut like bowstring. The delicate silver of Sam's tender hope. Power surged in those threads, bright and unpredictable. Bran guided them into the old stone the same way a harpist might pluck a melody from broken strings, coaxing warmth where cold had long held court. A soft cough tugged him fully awake. Jojen Reed sat up across the room, propped on furs, his eyes luminescent in the candle glow. His fever had broken, yet an otherworldly pall lingered, as though he peered at Bran from the far side of twilight. Mira dozed in a low stool beside him, braid unraveling down one shoulder. "Your roots burrowed deep last night," Jojen murmured. "I felt the earthquake in dream." Bran shifted, and pins of sensation pricked along his numb legs. Phantom reminders of a life before towers and shattered spines. "The heart tree answered," he whispered back. "But it cost me. It always does." Jojen's smile barely touched his lips. "Magic is a coin the world never forgives you for spending." Bran looked away. Beyond the infirmary's thin windows drifted a dawn tinged violet, all sharp edges dulled by fresh snow. The fleet of the dead had vanished with the tide. A legion of drowned corpses now slept beneath black waves. But every raven from Eastwatch carried warnings. Ice forming anew, whites scavenging the wreckage, and whiter sails glimpsed on the horizon. The respite tasted of ashes. Bootsteps clattered outside. The door swung open and Jon strode in, armor half-buckled, cheeks raw from the cold. Ghost padded at his heel, red eyes wary. "Maester Sam says you can sit upright?" Jon asked, gaze flicking from Bran to Jojen. Bran pushed himself with his arms, nodding. "I'm awake." "So's half the wall. They want to see the Stark who sings to ice." Jon managed a wan grin, but it faded quickly. "The brothers meet in the common hall at midday. I need you there." Mira stirred, rubbing her eyes. "He should rest." "No time." Jon's leather gauntlet creaked as he flexed his injured hand. Ravens from Deep Lake report a breach in an unmanned stretch. Some of the dead slipped south before your lattice reached them. "How many?" Bran asked. "Dozens? Hundreds." No scouts returned. "We have to prepare every soul on this side of the wall to fight." He looked at Jojen. "And we must decide whether to light the fire pits we buried beneath the foothills." "That was meant for a last resort," Mira said. Jon's shoulders sagged. "We're running out of first resorts." Bran met his brother's eyes, Eddard Stark's eyes. "Show me the breach," he said. Jon bore Bran on a crude sledge across the courtyard where black brothers drilled shoulder to shoulder with spearwives. Snow-softened sounds of wooden staves meeting shields rang under the pale sun. Tormund Giantsbane barked laughter as he cuffed a lanky ranger into a bank of snow, then hauled the man up with a guffaw. Farther off, Val oversaw the fletching of dragonglass arrows, her fingers swift, her orders sharper than any barb. They reached the rookery tower. Upstairs, ravens cawed among swinging cages. Scrolls lay scattered on a table beside a steaming kettle. Jon unrolled one parchment. Crude maps of the gift, charcoal circles marking wildling villages, arrows pointing south. 3 nights ago, he said, Hobbs' patrol found a family near Last Hearth. Dead, but fresh enough the frost hadn't taken their eyes. They tried to burn them. Fire wouldn't catch. Jon's knuckles whitened. We staked the bodies and ran. Bran closed his eyes. In the river of roots, he traced a plume of darkness drifting south through the woods. A chill wind trailing behind shapes that once were men. He tasted their hunger. Void turned outward. We can draw them. Bran opened his eyes. The wall's heart might still guide them back to the ice if we shine it bright enough. Jon frowned. Another lattice? Not from the tree alone. We need living guides. Bran gestured toward the window slit where ravens perched. I can ride the rookery. 1,000 black wings beating one call. Into white mouths? Into their eyes. I can lure them. Jon studied the map, jaw working. And then what? We can't keep splitting your soul every night. Not every night. Bran inhaled. Just once more, while you prepare the fire pits. Jon exhaled through his nose, nodding. I'll speak to Yarwick and Pike, but some of the brothers distrust more magic. They call you half-other already. Then I must show them I'm all Stark. Bran tried to straighten. Bring the Lord's Commander and the Free Folk chiefs to the hall. I'll speak. Jon clasped Bran's shoulder. You're a boy no more. The common hall of Castle Black stank of broth, sweat, and smoke. Iron braziers blazed along the central aisle, their flames painting wildling tattoos and knights watch black alike in shifting amber. Hodor stood sentinel behind Bran's chair, while Mira, spear in hand, lingered at his side. Jojen rested near the hearth. Tormund lounged on a bench, legs wide. Cotter Pike stared glumly into a mug of ale. Yarwick Holt drummed calloused fingers on the table. Val and a knot of spearwives watched from a balcony, braids intertwined with bone beads. Samwell shifted nervously by the door, scrolls clutched to his chest. Jon stepped forward, long claw sheathed but visible. Brothers, sisters, he began, voice rolling. Death walks beyond the trees, wearing the skins of our own. We bled at Eastwatch and survived. But the Night King is not broken. He turned, hand resting on Bran's chair back. My brother Brandon Stark helped us win that dawn. He will speak now. A hush swept the hall. Bran felt hundreds of eyes on him, some curious, some fearful. He swallowed, hearing the creak of timbers overhead. I was born to Winterfell, he began, forcing his voice steady. I was meant to be a knight once, but the gods had other designs. They showed me the veins of the earth, the ghosts in the ice, the songs in the trees. They showed me that every man and woman who lives owes a breath to those who kept the wall standing. First men, children of the forest, rangers fallen in the snow. Their memories are the mortar in these stones. He let the words settle. Fires snapped. At Eastwatch, I borrowed their memories. I wove them through the ice and shattered the bridge of the dead. That magic is not sorcery stolen from demons. It is the birthright of this land, and it listens to any heart that beats for the living. Crow or free folk, giant or green man. Bran's gaze swept the benches. I am not here to demand fealty. I am here to beg for faith. Lend me a night of your courage. March with me to the breach at Deep Lake. We will lure the dead back and burn the gift before they reach your children's beds. A murmur rippled. A grizzled ranger rose. And if your magic fails? If the Night King twists those ravens and sends them clawing at our eyes? Bran's hands trembled. He lifted one palm, letting the weirnet flow. A raven cried above, then another, a chorus. Dozens swept through the hall's open rafters, swirling in a dark halo before settling on beams, silent. Their eyes shone black, reflecting torchlight. I'm no king of ravens, Bran said quietly, merely their guest. They will fly where I ask so long as I return them to sky. He released the thread. The birds burst upward, vanishing through a smoke hatch. Gasps followed them. Tormund barked a laugh. Little Stark speaks big truths. I say we try. Cotter Pike slammed his mug down. Hells, better than waiting for corpses to knock at the gate. Yarwick grunted agreement. Jon turned to the hall. All who will march, ready arms by sunset. Holt, dig the pits. Pike, gather pitch. Tormund, your free folk guard the flanks. Val's voice lifted from the balcony. Leave your squabbles at the barracks. Salt and snow will devour us all the same if we fail. Her words severed murmurs like a blade. The crowd dispersed in urgent knots. Bran sagged, exhaustion washing over him. Mira offered a waterskin. You spoke like a lord. Like a Stark, Jojen corrected, lips curved. Bran sipped, grateful. Outside the hall, he felt the Weirnet's pulse quicken. Ravens drawing together, wind shifting. The long evening awaited. White sky collapsed into iron dusk. In the shadow of the wall, a host assembled. Black cloaks patched with fur, free folk in sealskins, giants lumbering with tree trunk clubs, horses snorting plumes of steam. Wagons creaked under barrels of pitch and wicker baskets brimming with obsidian. Bran sat atop Hodor's shoulders in a wicker fighting basket lashed to a saddle harness. Reins looped for Mira to steady. Summer prowled ahead, sniffing boot prints. Jon rode beside them, armor burnished by firelight. He looked 10 years older, yet his eyes held the same stubborn glint Bran remembered when Jon had taught him to loose his first arrow. Ghost slunk at his stirrup, tail twitching. They moved in silence under a sky bruised purple. Snow whispered down wide and slow, each flake heavy as a prayer. Bran tethered his mind to the flock overhead, hundreds of ravens now, blacker than the night itself, wheeling in unworried spirals. Through their eyes he glimpsed the line of torches snaking south, a brilliant artery against snow. Farther out, he tasted cold emptiness where the dead stalked, faint as distant thunder. The breach at Deep Lake appeared before full dark. A rent nearly 60 feet wide yawned at the wall's base, edges slick and melted into grotesque shapes. Frozen mud showed the drag marks of bodies pulled through. Whatever force opened the gap had cauterized the ice to glass. Jon cursed under his breath. Yarwick's builders set to work erecting barricades of sharpened stakes. Sam and two assisting stewards unloaded torches soaked in whale oil. Tormund directed free folk to bury fire pots in concentric circles. Under Hodor's watchful eye, Bran opened his spirit. The ravens answered, a swirl of wings condensed into a great black serpent riding the wind. Bran's vision split, one eye through human sight, the other behind glossy crow pupils. He felt the tug of each feather, the icy air rushing through hollow bones. He sent them forth, south through brittle branches, past the charred bones of a long-abandoned village, across a frozen rill where red water trickled under thin ice. Ravens cawed, gathering echoes. Bran pulled on threads of memory left in the forest. The scent of human blood, the warmth of campfires past. Like a hunter, he dragged those memories behind him, forcing them to linger in the air. He felt them, shadows moving between trees, clacking teeth that once chewed bread, blue eyes glowing like coals. They smelled life and heard heartbeats of birds overhead. Hunger steered them north, toward Bran's beacon. He turned back, funneling the flock skyward to mark the path. As he retreated, a sudden chill touched his soul, a spear of awareness. Something old and cruel glimpsed him through the weir net, a consciousness vast as night pressing against glass. The Night King watched, measuring. Bran recoiled, mind snapping back into flesh. His stomach lurched. Hodor steadied him. "Are they coming?" Jon asked. "Yes." Bran wiped blood from his upper lip. "Prepare the fires." Snow shadows deepened. Torches cast dancing gold on the breach. Sam passed among the ranks, doling vials of obsidian dust mixed with pine tar to smear on blades. Ghost and Summer prowled the perimeter, fur bristling. The first wight broke the treeline, a child no taller than Bran, hair iced to skull. It crawled like a spider, empty eyes fixed upon torchlight. An arrow whistled, Val's shot, piercing its cracked sternum. The corpse jerked, fell, twitched in the snow. Then the forest vomited the rest. They poured forth in silence. Hunters in tattered leathers, men-at-arms in rusted mail, women still clutching infants fused to frozen bosoms. Behind them lumbered a giant wight draped in chains of rime, ribs open like shattered gates. Blue fire leaked from its chest cavity. Jon shouted, and the line tightened. Hodor shifted Bran away from the front, but Bran lifted a trembling palm. He dove again into the ravens, now perched along stakes above the breach. At his pulse they took wing, swirling downward like a funnel. They harried the advancing horde, pecking rotten flesh, raking blue orbs. The dead clawed upward, jaws snapping, fracturing the swarm into black shards. But each raven carried Bran's whisper. "Follow." The horde funneled toward the breach where Yarwick's men had soaked the ground with whale oil. Bran signaled. Sam struck a flint to steel. Fire leapt. Blue flames roared along channels traced in the snow, blooming into a circle that trapped the first wave of corpses. Wights clawed at the barrier, moaning soundlessly as tongues of azure obliterated them. The smell of charred rot filled the air, but the giant wight strode through the flames, chains sizzling, ice armor refracting light. With one swing it shattered a barricade, spearing two rangers on broken stakes. Tormund charged, axe wrapped in dragonglass shards. He leapt onto a boulder, swung at the colossal knee. The weapon sheared bone but wedged. The giant howled, a hollow, flute-like bellow. It flung Tormund aside like a rag doll. Hodor growled, surprising Bran. The gentle giant's eyes hardened. He lowered Bran gently in the sled basket, then snatched a pitch-soaked log from a brazier. "Hodor!" he roared, bull-charging the dead colossus. The flame lit Hodor's beard. He rammed the torch into the giant's ribcage through the gaping cavity. Fire engulfed rotten lungs. The wight stumbled, swatting. Hodor ducked, seizing a chain, yanked. The colossus toppled onto the fire line, cracking like brittle ice. Blue light winked out. The corpse fell still. Cheers erupted. Tormund limped to his feet, laughing even as blood streamed from his brow. But more shapes emerged. Twice as many, then more, white walkers riding elk skeletons whose hooves shattered ice, directing the wights with spears that froze air. Their arrival silenced triumph. Bran reached deep, past exhaustion, past pain. He called the heart tree beneath the wall. Light pulsed in roots, but sluggish now, drained. He needed more. Something ancient stirred, a molten ember at the tree's core, a memory older than language. Giants crafting arrowheads of dragonglass, children chanting as they bled sap. Bran opened himself. Energy surged, scorching. His vision filled with green flames crawling up the inside of his skull. The ravens shrieked as the weirnet flared. Torches guttered. The air crackled. Snow melted around Bran in a perfect ring, hissing to steam. Summer crouched protectively, eyes wild. "Bran!" Mira shouted, but her voice seemed far away. The White Walkers felt it too. Their elk mounts skittered, ice hooves slipping. One walker hurled a spear of rime at Bran. Ghost leapt, intercepting. The spear shattered on the direwolf's back. Shards cut ghostly fur, but Ghost landed unbowed, lips curled, fangs dripping frost. Bran channeled the heart tree outward. The fire pits beneath the foothill ignited without spark. Emerald fire burst from earth, geysers of living flame. They arced like dragon breath across the battlefield, tracing sigils older than men. Where the green fire touched, whites withered to ash. Even the walkers reeled, ice crowns melting at the edges. But Bran's own veins felt aflame. He screamed. Blood spurted from nostrils and ears. Jojen cried out, crawling from his cot to reach Bran's side. "Close the branch," he rasped. "Too wide." Bran faltered. Heat scorched his marrow. The fire pits roared uncontrolled, charring soil, licking at wooden palisades. Jon sprang to Bran, seizing his shoulders. "Remember Winterfell," he shouted. "The gods would pond, mothers laugh. Close the door, Bran." Door. Bran visualized the Winterfell heart tree, red leaves dripping snowmelt onto dark water. He envisioned Maester Luwin's kind eyes, Robb's grin, old Nan's stories. He drew that memory around the raging power like a cloak. The weirnet sealed, the green flames subsiding into smoldering trenches that hissed but no longer leapt. Silence fell, broken only by crackling embers and distant screeches of surviving undead fleeing into night. Snow drifted across corpse ash. The battle was over. Bran collapsed against Hodor's kneecap. Mira and Sam rushed in. The world tilted, but Bran's thoughts clung to consciousness. He saw Jon, sword blackened at point, gazing over the ravaged field, chest heaving. Eyes blazing not with victory but dread of what such power cost. They returned at dawn. Castle Black's courtyard overcrowded with wounded, but songs of survival carried on cracked lips.
Pot shops lad brod.
Children of the free folk chased each other across trampled snow, giggling, no longer frightened of black cloaks. Maester Sam fussed over Bran's temple wounds. "No permanent harm," he declared, "though you keep this up and your skull will rattle." Bran managed a weak smile. Skulls rattle anyway when winter comes. Later, Jon convened a smaller council. Tormund, Yarwick, Cotter Pike, Val, Mira, Jojen in a sling, and Bran swathed in blankets beside the hearth. "We bought time," Jon began. "Time enough to send ravens south for aid. I've written Sansa the Vale, White Harbor, but ravens alone won't mend the wall. The breach can be resealed," Yarwick said. "If we harvest enough ice blocks and bind them with dragonglass mortar." Pike spat into the brazier. "And while we play masons, the Night King builds another fleet. We need ships of our own." Val crossed arms. "Wood is scarce north of the gift." Tormund thumped his chest. "We've men with axe skills, just need trees. South of the walls plenty. Let crows ask their Stark kin for timber." Jon looked at Bran. "If Winterfell sends lumber, will you anchor new magic into the seal?" Bran's marrow still ached, but he nodded. "Yes, slowly. No more wild firestorms." Jojen cleared his throat, voice echoing soft. "A storm yet stronger bruise. I dreamed of a crown of snow falling upon Dragonstone, and dragons crying fire that could not warm the world." Jon frowned. "Daenerys Targaryen? Her dragons," Jojen said. Burn bright, but the Night King knows dragonfire now. He seeks a flame colder than any breath to shatter theirs. Silence. Tormund spit. Fancy riddles. Bran closed his eyes, slipping into the tide. In quicksilver glimpses, he saw wings of onyx beating snow clouds, saw frozen chains coiling across scaled necks, saw a mountain of ice cracking under the weight of something vast. He shuddered. He means to forge an ice dragon, Bran murmured. Val's breath hissed through teeth. Then we strike before he tames the beast. How? Jon asked. We barely survive a dead giant. Bran opened eyes. By tearing the magic from under him. He looked to Mira. The children left seeds of dragonglass deeper than we know. Fire frozen in stone. If we find those mines, Jojen nodded, pale but fervent. We can wake the world's true dawn. Jon exhaled, decision crystallizing. Then that's our course. Arranging south of the Frostfangs. Find the caves the children whispered of. Mine dragonglass. Seal the wall, arm the realms. He surveyed the circle. Will you ride with me? Tormund grinned, teeth bright. You had to ask?
Val tootje dagger hilts.
For the realm of the living. Cotter Pike groaned. Bloody folly, but Yarwick scratched beard. I'll stay and mend the wall, but my builders will craft sledges for your haul. Jon turned last to Bran. And you? Bran's legs tingled, another phantom echo. He straightened despite blankets. I ride. Hodor beamed his simple blessing. Hodor. 2 nights later, under a waning red moon, Bran rolled through Castle Black's gate in a sleigh pulled by shaggy Frostfang ponies. A crisp wind carried the scent of pine, and distant in the east the first hint of aurora shimmered, ribbons of green that mirrored the fire Bran had unleashed. Jon rode at the head beside Val, Tormund behind with 2 giants. Dozens of rangers and spearwives closed ranks, each carrying picks, chisels, and sacks sewn of moleskin for volcanic glass rumored to lie beneath stone older than winter. The wall glowed faint behind them, cracks patched in new-cut ice, but its song in Bran's mind felt steadier, a wounded giant breathing slow but alive. Across the snow-covered gift they passed abandoned crofts where scarecrows still guarded withered wheat. At noon they found the corpses of 3 white walkers, armor melted, eyes void, evidence of the Night King's fury at losing prey. They buried them under cairns of salt-soaked rock, Sam reading stiff prayers. At dusk they camped beside a frozen stream, Jojen warmed by embers, whispering of oak shoots cracking stone. Mira sharpened her spear, glancing at Bran in the firelight with a flicker of gratitude and fear intertwined. Bran felt the same. Destiny tasted of iron and ash. Night deepened. Stars wheeled overhead like shards of shattered ice. Bran slipped into dreams. He walked through a cavern lit by blue crystals, walls seething with ancient runes. In the center rose a spire of dragonglass taller than Hodor, a sword of night waiting to be drawn. Yet coiled around its base lay a serpent of pale flame, its scales made of broken promises. When Bran reached for the blade, the serpent opened its maw, revealing the Night King's eyes within, and the cavern collapsed in screaming wind. He woke with a gasp. Jon sat opposite, polishing Longclaw. Dream, Bran nodded. A warning, he swallowed. The mines are warded by more than stone. Jon sheathed his sword. Then we face it together. Bran glanced at his brother, then at the sleeping column of warriors under canvas tarps, at Hodor snuggling Summer like a great child, at Jojen lying still but peaceful. Each soul a candle, yes, but together a bonfire. Together, Bran echoed. Dawn found them at the edge of the Frostfang foothills, where cliffs sloped into riddled crags. Steam rose from fissures, painting the snow in ghostly mist. Here, legend said, the children of the forest once forged obsidian arrows capable of slaying gods. A narrow tunnel mouth gaped in a hillside, rimmed with glyphs that glimmered when Bran's sled neared. He felt the glyphs humming recognition, kin calling kin. Cold sweat dampened his brow. Jon raised a hand. The column halted. He dismounted, Longclaw drawn. Val followed with a torch. Bran remained in the sled, but opened his mind. The runes whispered of an oath. Only those who bleed for the sap may pass. I must enter first, Bran said. Alone. Jon's jaw tightened. I won't allow. You can't force these wards with steel. Bran met his brother's stare. Let me do this, Jon. Trust me. Jon gripped Longclaw's hilt, knuckles white. At length he nodded. Hodor lifted Bran gently, carrying him to the threshold. Bran gestured him back. Thank you, friend. Hodor's eyes shone wet, but he obeyed. Bran slid across icy stone, palms blistering. The tunnel swallowed him. Glyphs lit jade green. Deeper, the air warmed, scented with sulfur and sap. Bioluminescent lichen painted walls with faint silver. At a bend, the passage widened into a chamber. In its center rose the dragonglass spire from his dream, obsidian dark veined with shimmering red. Runes circled it like rings of forgotten planets. Bran's breath caught. Around the spire sprouted smaller shards, hundreds, half buried in shale. Enough to arm an army. But the serpent was real. A coil of mist rising from fissures, coalescing into a wraith of ice-blue flame. It unfurled wings of vapor, face shifting into pale visages. Lyanna Stark's smile, Hodor's howl, Jojen's fevered gaze, each a blade to Bran's heart. I am the debt, the wraith whispered in voices layered. Magic spent must be paid. Choose your coin, Green Seer. Bran's knees buckled. He tasted blood again. I have nothing left. The wraith laughed, echo fracturing. Your breath, your brother's oath, a giant's door you spared. All may serve. Bran forced himself upright, palms against cold stone. He remembered Maester Luwin teaching barter. When you own nothing of coin, trade promise, trade knowledge, trade song. I offer memory, Bran said. All I have seen, the truth of the past. I give it to the world. The wraith hissed. Truth is wind. We hunger for blood. No, Bran's voice cracked but held. Truth is seed. Blood waters soil, but seed grows forests. You crave life to feed death, yet death makes nothing. He placed a trembling hand on the spire. Take my memories. Show all who wield these blades the full cost of magic. That is my bargain. The wraith hesitated. Flames flickered. Then it lunged, pouring into Bran's mind. Images ripped free. His fall, mother's scream. Ned dying on Baelor's steps. Hodor's doomed future. Dragons over black pyramids. The Night King's birth in thorns. Each memory seared as it left, yet left behind a strange peace. When the last image vanished, the wraith shrank to a single spark, then guttered out. Silence reigned. Bran's vision blurred but steadied. The spire glowed faint emerald. At its base lay a dagger of polished dragonglass shaped like a leaf. Bran grasped it. The blade felt warm. Footsteps echoed. Jon burst in, Val and Tormund behind. Bran! Jon's voice shook. Seeing Bran still standing, he relaxed slightly, but his eyes widened at the dagger. It's safe, Bran croaked. The mine is ours. They stared at the sea of obsidian shards dotting the cavern. Tormund whistled low. Enough toys to prick an army of dead bears.
Valknelt Tratzingrunes.
But they burn your palm, little Stark. Bran opened his fingers. The blade's edge shimmered but did not sear. The cost is paid. Jon sheathed Longclaw, exhaling. Then we mine until our backs break. Weeks passed in a blur of labor. Sled teams hauled black glass north. Holtz builders forged new spear points, arrowheads, axes. The walls breached sealed inch by inch with bricks bound in obsidian mortar. News came on swift wings. Sansa marching from Winterfell with lumber. Davos Seaworth sailing north with provisions from White Harbor. Even Ser Brienne leading Knights of the Vale to the neck. Word of an ice dragon forging near the shivering sea spurred urgency. Bran trained rangers in sigils of fire to anchor the wall's lattice along every tower. Jojen's strength returned. He spent evenings with Sam scribing chronicles of children lore. Mira patrolled the woods, spear thirsty for another walker. Hodor helped giants in hauling logs, humming gentle tunes. On the first full moon of the new year, Jon summoned the gathered host beneath the repaired breach. Thousands stood, Black cloaks, free folk, mountain clans, northern levies. The air trembled with anticipation and fear. Bran, perched in his wicker basket, felt the wall hum brighter than he'd ever heard. Veins glowing beneath ice like sunrise under glass. Jon raised Longclaw, voice carrying on cold wind. We face a storm that wants to swallow songs, burn memories, end dawn. But we stand with dragonglass in hand, fire in heart, and truth at our side. He glanced up at Bran. My brother gave us this dawn. Now we give dawn to the realms of men. A roar answered, giants beating clubs, wildlings howling, crows rapping sword on shield. The sound rolled south like thunder. Bran closed his eyes, merging with the wall. He felt every heartbeat in time. Somewhere in the trees, the Night King watched, crown of ice gleaming, ice dragon forming in distant gloom. But Bran did not tremble. He spread his mind across snowfields, past rivers glazed with moonlight, into the veins of stone beneath. The world's memory answered, swelling like a tide. As it rose, Bran understood. Memory was not coin to be spent, nor burden to hoard. Memory was a weapon, bright as dragonglass, sharp as morning. He lifted his voice, young, cracked, unsteady but ringing, over the army of the living. And he began to tell them the story of how the Night King once was made, how magic birthed horror, how love could unmake it if wielded true. The tale wove through the crowd. Torches seemed to burn steadier, breaths to steady. The war for dawn would come with the next moon, with ice wings blotting starlight and the wall's veins ablaze. But Bran believed now that doors could hold without blood, that giants could live to laugh, that Starks could reclaim more than snow-bitten graves. He believed, fiercely holy, that the song of memories would outlast the scream of winter. And as the army marched east to meet the rising dark, the wall behind them glowed like the spine of a living dragon, bright with all the lives sworn to defend it, alive with every story yet to be told.